The Manchu are an ethnic minority who mostly live in China and the people from whom Manchuria derives its name. They are sometimes called red-tasseled Manchus, a reference to the ornamentation on traditional Manchu hats. Manchus form the largest branch of the Tungusic peoples and are distributed throughout China, forming the fourth largest ethnic group in that country. They can be found in 31 Chinese provincial regions. They also form the largest minority group in China without an autonomous region. Among them, Liaoning has the largest population and Hebei, Heilongjiang, Jilin, Inner Mongolia and Beijing have over 100,000 Manchu residents. About half of the population live in Liaoning province and one-fifth in Hebei province. There are a number of Manchu autonomous counties in China, such as Xinbin, Zhujiang, Qinglong, Fenning, Yitong, Qingyuan, Weikang, Guancheng, Bengxi, Kuondian, Wanren, Fengcheng, Beizhen and over 300 Manchu towns and townships. History, origins and early history. The Manchus are descended from the Jurchen people who earlier established the Jin dynasty in China, but as early as the semi-mythological chronicles of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors there is mention of the Jurchens, a Tungusic people from the northern Manchurian region of Northeast Asia, who paid bows and arrows as tribute to Emperor Shun and later to the Zhou dynasty. The Jurchens used flint-headed wooden arrows, farmed, hunted and fished, and lived in caves and trees. The cognates Jurchen and Jurchen again appear in the Shanhai Jing and Book of Wei during the dynastic era, referring to Tungusic Mohe tribes of the far northeast. The Mohe practiced pig farming extensively and were mainly sedentary, and also used both pig and dog skins for coats. They were predominantly farmers and grew soybeans, wheat, millet and rice, in addition to hunting. In the 10th century CE, the term Jurchen first appeared in documents of the late Tang dynasty in reference to the state of Bala in present-day northeastern China. Following the fall of Bala, the Jurchens became vassals of the Khatan-led Liao dynasty. The Jurchens in the Yalu River region were tributaries of Goryeo since the reign of Wang Jian, who called upon them during the wars of the later Three Kingdoms period. But the Jurchens switched allegiance between Liao and Goryeo multiple times, taking advantage of the tension between the two nations, posing a potential threat to Goryeo's border security. The Jurchens offered tribute to the Goryeo court, expecting lavish gifts in return. In the year 1114, Juanyan Aguda united the Jurchen tribes and established the Jin dynasty. His brother and successor Juanyan Wujimai defeated the Liao dynasty. After the fall of the Liao dynasty, the Jurchens went to war with the northern Song dynasty, and captured most of northern China in the Jin-Song Wars. During the Jin dynasty, the first Jurchen script came into use in the 1120s. It was mainly derived from the Khitan script. The Jurchens were sedentary, settled farmers with advanced agriculture. They farmed grain and millet as the cereal crops, grew flax, and raised oxen, pigs, sheep and horses. The farming way of life was very different from the pastoral nomadism of the Mongols and the Khitans on the steppes. In 1206, the Mongols, who were vassals to the Jurchens, rose in Mongolia. The leader, Genghis Khan, led Mongol troops against the Jurchens, who were finally defeated by Ugadai Khan in 1234. Under the Mongols' control, the Jurchens were divided into 2 groups and treated differently. The ones who were born and raised in North China and fluent in Chinese were considered to be Chinese, but the people who were born and raised in the Jurchen homeland without Chinese-speaking abilities were treated as Mongols politically. For that time, the Jurchens of North China increasingly merged with the Han Chinese, while those living in the homeland started to be Mongolized. They adopted Mongolian customs, names and the Mongolian language. As time went on, fewer and fewer Jurchens could recognize their own script. The Mongol-led Yuan dynasty was replaced by the Ming dynasty in 1368. In 1387, Ming forces defeated the Mongol commander Nagatu's resisting forces who settled in the Hexi area and began to summon the Jurchen tribes to pay tribute. At the time, some Jurchen clans were vassals to the Joseon dynasty of Korea such as Odolai and Hulagai. Their elites served in the Korean royal bodyguard. The Joseon Koreans tried to deal with the military threat posed by the Jurchen by using both forceful means and incentives, and by launching military attacks. At the same time they tried to appease them with titles and degrees, traded with them, and sought to acculturate them by having Korean women marry Jurchens and integrating them into Korean culture. Despite these measures, however, fighting continued between the Jurchen and the Koreans. The relationship was eventually stopped by the Ming dynasty government, who wanted the Jurchens to protect the border. In 1403, Ahaku, chieftain of Hulagai, paid tribute to the Yongle emperor of the Ming dynasty. Soon after that, Mongkatima, chieftain of the Odolai clan of the Jianzhou Jurchens, defected from paying tribute to Korea, becoming a tributary state to China instead. Yiseongaya, the Tareyo of Joseon, asked the Ming Empire to send Mongkatima back but was refused. The Yongle emperor was determined to wrest the Jurchens out of Korean influence and have China dominate them instead. Korea tried to persuade Mongkatima to reject the Ming overtures but was unsuccessful since Mongkatima submitted to the Ming Empire. Since then, more and more Jurchen tribes presented tribute to the Ming Empire in succession. They were divided into 384 guards by Ming, and the Jurchen became vassals to the Ming Empire. During the Ming dynasty, the name for the Jurchen land was Nogan. The Jurchens became part of the Ming dynasty's Nogan Regional Military Commission under the Yongle Emperor, with Ming forces erecting the Yongning Temple's stela in 1413 at the headquarters of Nogan. The stela was inscribed in Chinese, Jurchen, Mongolian and Tibetan. In 1449, Mongol Taishi Azan attacked the Ming Empire and captured the Zhangtong Emperor in Tumu. Some Jurchen guards in Jianzhou and Hexi cooperated with Azan's action, but more were attacked by the Mongol invasion. Many Jurchen chieftains lost the hereditary certificates granted by the Ming government. They had to present tribute to secretariats with less reward from the Ming court than in the time when they were heads of guards. An unpopular development. Subsequently, more and more Jurchens recognized the Ming Empire's declining power due to Azan's invasion. The Zhangtong Emperor's capture directly caused Jurchen guards to go out of control. Tribal leaders, such as Kung San and Wang Gao, brazenly plundered Ming territory. At about this time, the Jurchen script was officially abandoned. More Jurchens adopted Mongolian as the writing language and fewer used Chinese. 1526 was the year in which the final remaining recorded Jurchen writing was dated to. The Manchus are sometimes mistaken as nomadic people while they are not nomads. The Manchu way of life was described as agricultural, farming crops and raising animals on farms. Manchus practiced slash-and-burn agriculture in the areas north of Shenyang. The Hexi Jurchens were semi-agricultural. The Jianzhou Jurchens and Maolian Jurchens were sedentary, while hunting and fishing was the way of life of the wild Jurchens. Han Chinese society resembled that of the sedentary Jianzhou and Maolian, who were farmers. Hunting, archery on horseback, horsemanship, livestock raising, and sedentary agriculture were all practiced by the Jianzhou Jurchens as part of the culture. In spite of the fact that the Manchus practiced archery on horseback and equestrianism, the Manchus' immediate progenitors practiced sedentary agriculture. Although the Manchus also partook in hunting, they were sedentary. The primary mode of production was farming, while they lived in villages, forts, and towns surrounded by walls. Farming was practiced by their Jurchen predecessors. Although their Mohe ancestors did not respect dogs, the Jurchens began to respect dogs around the time of the Ming dynasty, and passed this tradition on to the Manchus. It was prohibited in Jurchen culture to use dog skin, and forbidden for Jurchens to harm, kill, or eat dogs. For political reasons, the Jurchen leader Naresi chose variously to emphasize either differences or similarities in lifestyles with other peoples like the Mongols. Naresi said to the Mongols that the languages of the Chinese and Koreans are different, but their clothing and way of life is the same. It is the same with Manchus and Mongols. Our languages are different, but our clothing and way of life is the same. Later Naresi indicated that the bond with the Mongols was not based in any real shared culture. It was for pragmatic reasons of mutual opportunism, since Naresi said to the Mongols, "You Mongols raise livestock, eat meat and wear pelts. My people till the fields and live on grain. We too are not one country and we have different languages." Manchu rule over China a century after the chaos started in the Jurchen lands, Naresi, a chieftain of the Jianzhou left guard, began a campaign against the Ming Empire in revenge for the manslaughter of his grandfather and father in 1583. He reunified the Jurchen tribes, established a military system called the Eight Banners, which organized Jurchen soldiers into groups of bannermen, and ordered his scholar Urdani and minister Gagai to create a new Jurchen script using the traditional Mongolian alphabet as a reference. In 1603, Naresi gained recognition as the Shorkundulan Khan Manchu. Mollendorf, Shorkundulan Han, Abgai, Shorkundulan Han, wise and respected Khan from his Kharka-Mongol allies. Then in 1616 he publicly enthroned himself and issued a proclamation naming himself Genghis Ying Khan Manchu. Mollendorf, Genghis Ying Han, Abgai, Genghis Ying Han, Bright Khan, of the later Jin dynasty Manchu. Mollendorf, Amagaresan Gurun, Abgai, Amagaresan Gurun. Naresi then launched his attack on the Ming dynasty and moved the capital to Mukden after his conquest of Liaodong. In 1635, his son and successor Hu Wangtaiji changed the name of the Jurchen ethnic group to the Manchu. A year later, Hu Wangtaiji proclaimed himself the emperor of the Qing dynasty Manchu. Mollendorf, Daixing Gurun, Abgai, Daiqing Gurun. Factors for the change of name of these people from Jurchen to Manchu include the fact that the term Jurchen had negative connotations associated with it, since the Jurchens had been in a servile position to the Ming dynasty for several hundred years, and it also referred to people of the dependent class. In 1644, the Ming capital, Beijing, was sacked by a peasant revolt led by Li Zicheng, a former minor Ming official who became the leader of the peasant revolt, who then proclaimed the establishment of the Shun dynasty. The last Ming ruler, the Chongzhen emperor, committed suicide by hanging himself when the city fell. When Li Zicheng moved against the Ming general Wu Sangua, the latter made an alliance with the Manchus and opened the Shanhai Pass to the Manchu army. After the Manchus defeated Li Zicheng, they moved the capital of the new Qing Empire to Beijing in the same year. The Qing government differentiated between Han bannermen and ordinary Han civilians. Han bannermen were made out of Han Chinese who defected to the Qing Empire up to 16 1644 and joined the Eight Banners, giving them social and legal privileges in addition to being acculturated to Manchu culture. So many Han defected to the Qing Empire and swelled up the ranks of the Eight Banners that ethnic Manchus became a minority within the banners, making up only 16% in 1648, with Han bannermen dominating at 75% and Mongol bannermen making up the rest. It was this multi-ethnic majority Han force in which Manchus were a minority, which conquered China for the Qing Empire. A mass marriage of Han Chinese officers and officials to Manchu women numbering 1,000 couples was arranged by Prince Yoto and Hong Taiji in 1632 to promote harmony between the two ethnic groups. To promote ethnic harmony, a 1648 decree from the Shunshi Emperor allowed Han Chinese civilian men to marry Manchu women from the banners with the permission of the Board of Revenue if they were registered daughters of officials or commoners, or the permission of the banner company captain if they were unregistered commoners. It was only later in the dynasty that these policies allowing intermarriage were done away with. As a result of the conquest of China, almost all the Manchus followed the Prince Regent Dorgan and the Shunshi Emperor to Beijing and mainly settled there. A few of them were sent to other places such as Inner Mongolia, Xinjiang and Tibet to serve as garrison troops. There were only 1524 bannermen left in Manchuria at the time of the initial Manchu conquest. After a series of border conflicts began with the Russians, the Qing emperors started to realize the strategic importance of Manchuria and gradually sent Manchus back to where they originally came from. However, throughout the Qing dynasty, Beijing was the only focal point of the ruling Manchus in the political, economic and cultural spheres of this era of Chinese civilization. The Yongzheng emperor noted, "Garrisons are the places of stationed works. Beijing is the homeland." While the Manchu ruling elite at the Qing imperial court in Beijing and posts of authority throughout China increasingly adopted Han culture, the Qing imperial government viewed the Manchu communities in Manchuria as a place where traditional Manchu virtues could be preserved, and as a vital reservoir of military manpower fully dedicated to the regime. The Qing emperors tried to protect the traditional way of life of the Manchus in central and northern Manchuria by a variety of means. In particular, they restricted the migration of Han settlers to the region. This ideal, however, had to be balanced with practical needs, such as maintaining the defensive northern China against the Russians and the Mongols, supplying government farms with a skilled workforce, and conducting trade in the region's products, which resulted in a continuous trickle of Han convicts, workers, and merchants to the northeast. However, this policy of artificially isolating the Manchus of the northeast from the rest of China could not last forever. In the 1850s, large numbers of Manchu bannermen were sent to central China to fight the Taiping rebels. Those few who returned were demoralized and often disposed to opium addiction. In 1860, in the aftermath of the loss of the Outer Manchuria, and with the imperial and provincial governments in deep financial trouble, parts of Manchuria became officially open to Chinese settlement. Within a few decades, the Manchus became a minority in most of Manchuria's districts. Dulimbai Gurun is the Manchu name for China. After conquering the Ming dynasty, the king rulers typically referred to the state as the Great King, or Daising Gurun in Manchu. In some documents the state, or parts of it, is referred to as China, or Dulimbai Gurun, in the Manchu tongue. Debate continues over whether the king equated the lands of the king state, including present-day Manchuria, Xinjiang, Mongolia, Tibet and other areas, as China in both the Chinese and Manchu languages. Some scholars claim that the Qing rulers defined China as a multi-ethnic state, rejecting the idea that China only meant Han areas, proclaiming that both Han and non-Han peoples were part of China, using China to refer to the Qing dynasty's empire in official documents, international treaties, and foreign affairs, and the term Chinese people Zhongguo Ryukuten Manchu, Dulimbai Guru Nai Ni Yalma referred to all the Han, Manchu, and Mongol subjects of the Qing Empire. When the Qing Empire conquered Dzungaria in 1759, they proclaimed that the new land was absorbed into China in a Manchu language memorial. The Qing government expounded in their ideology that they were bringing together the outer, non-Han Chinese like the Inner Mongols, Eastern Mongols, Oirat Mongols, and Tibetans together with the inner, Han Chinese, into one family, united in the Qing state, showing that the diverse subjects of the Qing Empire were all part of one family. The Qing government used the phrase Zhonghuayijia or Nihuayijia to convey this idea of unification of the different peoples of their empire. A Manchu language version of a treaty with the Russian Empire concerning criminal jurisdiction over bandits called people from the Qing Empire as people of the Central Kingdom. In the Manchu official Tlisen's Manchu language account of his meeting with the Torgid leader Ayuka Khan, it was mentioned that while the Torgids were unlike the Russians, the people of the Central Kingdom were like the Torgids, and the people of the Central Kingdom referred to the Manchus. It was possible for Han bannermen and Han bond servants to become Manchu by being transferred into the upper three Manchu banners and having their surname Manchu feed with the addition of "-jia" as a suffix. The process was called taiki in Chinese. It typically occurred in cases of intermarriage with the Azanjoro clan, and the close relatives of the concubine or empress would get promoted for the Han banner to the Manchu banner and become Manchu. Modern times, many Manchu bannermen in Beijing supported the Boxers in the Boxer Rebellion and shared their anti-foreign sentiment. The Manchu bannermen were devastated by the fighting during the First Sino-Japanese War and the Boxer Rebellion, sustaining massive casualties sustained during the wars and subsequently being driven into extreme suffering and hardship. Much of the fighting in the Boxer Rebellion against the foreigners in defense of Beijing in Manchuria was done by Manchu banner armies, which were destroyed while resisting the invasion. The German minister Clemens von Kettler was assassinated by a Manchu. Thousands of Manchus fled south from Agan during the fighting in the Boxer Rebellion in 1900. The cattle and horses were then stolen by Russian Cossacks, who then burned the villages and homes until only ashes were left. The clan system of the Manchus in Agan was obliterated by the despoliation of the area at the hands of the Russian invaders. By the 19th century, most Manchus in the city garrisons no longer spoke Manchu. Instead, they spoke the Beijing dialect of Mandarin Chinese, a standard Chinese which still marked them out as distinctive compared to the Han neighbors in southern China who spoke non-Mandarin dialects. The fact that they spoke Beijing dialect made recognizing Manchus relatively easy. It was Northern Standard Chinese which the Manchu bannermen spoke instead of the local dialect which the Han people around the garrison spoke, so that Manchus in the garrisons at Jingzhou and Guangzhou both spoke Mandarin, despite the fact that Cantonese was spoken at Guangzhou, and a Beijing dialect marked out the Manchu bannermen at the Xian garrison. Apart from other people, many Manchu bannermen got jobs as Mandarin teachers, writing textbooks for learning Mandarin and instructing people in Mandarin. In Guangdong, the Manchu Mandarin teacher Sun Yezu soon advised that the Yinyuan Shanwei and Kangxi Zedian dictionaries issued by the Qing government were the correct guides to Mandarin pronunciation, rather than the pronunciation of the Beijing and Nanjing dialects. For teaching the Beijing dialect, Kugaigard, the Japanese foreign language school, hired a Manchu in 1876. The Han Chinese Li Guoji, the grandson of Li Hongzhang, married the Manchu daughter of Natong, the Grand Secretary. Most intermarriage consisted of Han Bannermen marrying Manchus in areas like Aihun. Han Chinese Bannermen wedded Manchus, and there was no law against this. As the end of the Qing dynasty approached, Manchus were portrayed as outside colonizers by Chinese nationalists such as Sun Yat-sen, even though the Republican Revolution he brought about was supported by many reform-minded Manchu officials and military officers. This portrayal dissipated somewhat after the 1911 revolution, as the new Republic of China now sought to include Manchus within its national identity. In order to blend in, some Manchus switched to speaking the local dialect instead of standard Chinese. By the early years of the Republic of China, very few areas of China still had traditional Manchu populations. Among the few regions where such comparatively traditional communities could be found, and where the Manchu language was still widely spoken, were the Agan district and the Qiqihar district of Heilongjiang province. Until 1924, the Chinese government continued to pay stipends to Manchu bannermen. However, many cut the links with the banners and took on Han-style names in shame to avoid persecution. The official total of Manchus fell by more than half during this period, as they refused to admit to their ethnicity when asked by government officials or other outsiders. On the other hand, in warlord Zhang Zuolan's reign in Manchuria, a much better treatment than the situation of Manchus in mainland China was reported. There were not any particular persecutions towards Manchus. Even the mausoleums of Qing's emperors were still allowed to be managed by Manchu guardsmen like it was in the past. In this case, many Manchus joined the Fangshan clique, such as Shi Qi, who was a member of the Qing dynasty's imperial clan. As a follow-up action to the Mukden incident, Manchukuo, a puppet state in Manchuria, was created by the Empire of Japan, which was nominally ruled by the deposed last emperor, Pui, in 1932. Although the nation's name was related to Manchus, it was actually a completely new country for all the ethnicities in Manchuria, which had a majority Han population and was opposed by many Manchus-like people of other ethnicities who fought against Japan in the Second Sino-Japanese War. 2. The Japanese Wedek Yusuke labeled all 30 million people in Manchuria as Manchus, including Han Chinese, despite the fact that most of them were not ethnic Manchu, and the Japanese written Great Manchukuo built upon Ueda's argument to claim that all 30 million Manchus in Manchukuo had the right to independence to justify splitting Manchukuo from China. In 1942, the Japanese written 10-year history of the construction of Manchukuo attempted to emphasize the right of ethnic Japanese to the land of Manchukuo while attempting to delegitimize the Manchus claim to Manchukuo as the native land, noting that most Manchus moved out during the Qing dynasty and only returned later. In 1952, after the failure of both Manchukuo and the nationalist government, the newborn People's Republic of China officially recognized the Manchu as one of the ethnic minorities in 1952. In the 1953 census, 2.5 million people identified themselves as Manchu. The communist government also attempted to improve the treatment of Manchu people. Some Manchu people who had hidden their ancestry during the period of KMT rule thus became more comfortable to reveal their ancestry, such as the writer Lao Shi, who began to include Manchu characters in his fictional works in the 1950s. Between 1982 and 1990, the official count of Manchu people more than doubled from 4,299,159 to 9,821,180, making them China's fastest-growing ethnic minority. In fact, however, this growth was not due to natural increase, but instead people formally registered as Han applying for official recognition as Manchu. Since the 1980s, 13 Manchu autonomous counties have been created in Liaoning, Jilin, Hebei and Heilongjiang. The Eight Banners system is one of the most important ethnic identity of today's Manchu people. So nowadays, Manchus are more like an ethnic community which not only contains the descendants of Manchu Bannermen, also has a large number of Manchu assimilated Chinese and Mongol Bannermen. However, 5 ethnic groups which were considered as Manchu Bannermen under the Qing dynasty were registered as independent ethnic groups by the PRC government. Since the 1980s, the reform after Cultural Revolution, there has been a renaissance of Manchu culture and language among the government, scholars and social activities with remarkable achievements. It was also reported that the resurgence of interest also spread among Han Chinese.